Thank you very much, because the issue runs the risk of cutting into the finances.
Right.
And talk about best practices. I have yet to see any list or discussion of best practices from the charter schools, and that was part of the original 1993 legislation.
Exactly.
And it hasn't been shared. So, and I might add, I was hired by the Edison Project to be their contact when they first worked. I was a sitting school committee person and working in the charter school movement. But I never found, except for one report from the Pioneer Institute, any evidence that things are being done better. A lot of marketing. Yep. So I'll be glad to follow up.
Check with us, and in fact, Kevin, make sure we get the card, because Kevin can give you the contacts that you need in our office on that.
Thanks.
Paul?
Will you look into the, quite how to describe it, the school assistance money, the formula for it? Yeah.
From the state, you mean in terms of? Yeah, you bet. I mean, one of the
because
things I want to do is take a
I
look at
think
all
the
of that.
formula is very unfair to Cape Cod.
And a lot of those formulas are old, or they're set based somewhat arbitrarily. And I must admit, I'm not familiar with it directly, but I will be. And that this is one of our big investments, right? We want to do it right. We want to spend the money, but it's got to go where it's supposed to go. And one of the things I intend to do, as I did in the AG's office, is take a good look at where do we spend money? Is it going where it's supposed to go? Because we don't have a lot of extra money in the state, and I don't want to waste any tax dollars. And that includes looking at those formulas in terms of, is this fair? Is it fair in 2014? You know, it may have been, even if it was fair 5 years ago or 10 years ago, is it fair now? But that's a good point, and it's all of that is, I think a new governor coming in has to take a look at all of that at this stage of the game.
I think part of the problem is the incorrect view of the value, the property values.
Well, we know that's changed, right?
It gives, well, it's going up on the Cape again.
Well, that's good, but it's got a way to go to get back where it was, and we want it to be healthy, right? We don't want this bubble again.
But for a lot of people on the Cape, they bought these homes when they were much less.
Yes.
And now they live in them.
Yep.
And they don't have children and things. And we have a lot of snowbirds.
Yes.
It's like a second home for them.
Yes.
And so I think the idea that the government has is that everybody on Cape Cod is very wealthy. And it's
well,
not.
we know otherwise.
It's not true.
Well, and look, I know that from the Cape. I certainly know that on the vineyard. Everything's Martha's Vineyard. But if you're in the vineyard in December, I mean, I know that.
And we try and pretend on the Cape that there's no poverty.
Yeah.
And there's a tremendous amount of it in Hyannis.
No, not just in Hyannis. You find pockets of the need for, EBT and the other kinds of benefits. People who retire, particularly with this recession and people thinking their home values would support them and they didn't. I appreciate that. There's a range of issues down here that you can't, one size does not fit all, whether it is schools or the issue of economic opportunity down here and development. And so I agree with you, and I know that's true. So.
Thank you.
What about the issue of property insurance?
My close to my heart. Everybody want to hear some bad news? One of the things we've been pushing with your federal delegation, including Senator Warren and Ed Markey, Elizabeth is leading the charge on this, and certainly Bill Keating and Steve Lynch have been out in front on it. Just in a nutshell, after the huge losses with Katrina and all of the Sandy, FEMA has decided to redo its maps, its flood maps. So two things are going to happen. People who were not in them before will be in them, and FEMA is taking away the subsidy that it is given to mortgage flood insurance. And if you have a mortgage, the federal government requires, federal government and the state require now that you have more flood mortgage insurance. I just filed a bill with Speaker DeLeo this week to say at least the banks can only require you to insure with up to the bank's interest. You will be given notice if you know, you're not covering either value of your home or certainly replacement, but the bank can't make you get insurance on the whole value of your home, only to the amount of their interest. That is just a small Band-Aid on a much bigger problem. And so what I said to Situate in Marshfield, where they've already redrawn the maps, people are getting notices that their flood insurance is going up by a factor of 10. How many here, how many in the room pay flood insurance for your homes? And give me some idea, do you know what it is per year?
Way too much.
It is way too much as it is, but so fasten your seatbelt, because it's $1,000 now, $800,000 now, it could go up to $8,000. I mean, I tell you, but it's unsustainable. It is unaffordable, so, Mississippi's fighting it, we're fighting it, we're asking FEMA to do two things, to delay the implementation of this and go back and look at what is fair. They're supposed to, under the federal statute, do surveys to determine the affordability of this. We also think they're using models that maybe for Louisiana or Florida work, but not necessarily Situate, Marshfield, or even the Cape. Even with global warming, we don't have the kinds of storms or the damage that those parts of the country do. And you can't come up here and say, we're asking everybody, you know, this is the same idea that we take a big picture, and so we're putting an unfair burden on homeowners and businesses in Massachusetts. I mean, I talked to Situate and Marshfield people, they've gotten their bills. Restaurant right on the water, they haven't seen us, they're up, they haven't seen damage in 25 years, 30 years, they're not going to, but their bill was gonna go up, you know, to something they can't afford. One of the people in my office, father and his wife were gonna sell their home. The deal fell through because the owner said, I can't buy this home because I'm not going to be able to pay for the flood insurance. One woman said, and these are the numbers we're talking about, said, we have a nice home, we're right on the water in Situate, my husband and I can afford our new bill of $60,000 for flood insurance. We can afford it, but we won't be able to sell the home, and we're just about to downsize and move. And so the real estate market, just as it's evening out. So I tell you this to sound the alarm. Pretend I'm Paul Revere for a minute, right? FEMA is coming, and it's not pretty. So you need to get all of your state reps and senators, your congressmen on board. You need to make noise about this. It is totally unfair. We're trying to do what we can at the state level. It's got to be solved federally, but they have to hear from everybody. I can follow up with you, Bob, and anybody who's particularly interested in it. Kevin and I have contacts, but Senator Warren has to hear from you, Ed Markey has to hear from you. We'll talk to your delegation on the state level, but this is a place where you need to make some noise. The only good, I said this last week, the only good news about Washington being totally shut down is that maybe FEMA won't be able to do anything in the short run, because what they're doing is not good for Massachusetts. And actually it's going to be all up and down the eastern seaboard. And it's not, you will see it the worst, coastal towns in the Cape, but they're going after places in Worcester, Western Mass, where there are rivers, floodplains. You know, Irene hit, and you know the rivers overflow, and so it's not good. So just be prepared. I'm giving you that warning now. So educate yourselves about it, and that is something we need to make noise about.
Do we have anybody that officially puts together the incidents, statistics of floods or damage over the years? Or is there a place, a site online to go to?
I don't know the answer to that. I assume, you know, through MEMA and some of the state agencies under the governor's office that are responsible for that. But a lot of this is done, you know, the flood insurance program is done at the federal level. And that is a good question, because I don't know if anybody's been directly.
That would be a defense,
yes.
I would think, you know, at a certain elevation, and if it hasn't happened in 35
Yep.
years, you know.
The argument, though, just so you're aware, is that look at after Sandy and after Katrina, you know, and we do know erosion is greater, the oceans are rising, etc. So we know that there are going to be incidents and weather patterns that are probably unpredictable, but even at the outer, you know, the worst possible, they're not going to be what they're requiring. So I met an airport owner in Marshfield who said, well, FEMA now says that our runways have to be 17 feet off the ground. So, hello, that's impossible. But this is what the federal government does, right? Doesn't matter.
And if you know Marshfield's input, you know it's impossible.
There must be a way to mathematically figure in the new incidents of, with the rising water and the incidents of storms.
Well, that's what you would think, and that's what we're saying, they need to do their homework on that before they come and do these maps and give these numbers, so.
I know you have other appointment. Excuse me. We'll make David the last question, but if you could stick around a little bit after.
Sure. Yep.
I should always be the last question. I talk too much.
Really?
Questions are supposed to be short.
I'm very nice. Thank you so much for coming over here.
My pleasure.
It's wonderful having you. This is something different. 2 years ago, right, throughout the country, like 36 or 38 governors were put into a Republican. Well, their big vendetta is against the gays, women's rights, even taking away the votes from the black people and the Latinos. Are you going to be talking about that in your campaign to us? Because I think a lot of, especially gay people, want to hear what you have to say about that.
Absolutely, and one of the things that's been so much fun in our office has been able to not only use the law but the bully pulpit around, and this is what I've learned, it's not just a question of saying, well, we're not going to discriminate, this is a question of inclusion. How do people feel welcome, how do people feel that they are going to fully participate in all the things a lot of us just take for granted, that we can get married, that we can have kids, that we will not be taunted online or in person. In Massachusetts, we're pretty lucky compared to other states. I was in Greenfield Thursday meeting with some activists, and African-American woman had moved here from Ohio with her partner, who is a state rep. She said, we got married, and she said, it's been unbelievable because I've assumed we've been together in Ohio for 30 years, but we couldn't really tell anybody. And I just accepted that because that's what I had to do. But now that I'm here, I recognize what I had not had for 30 years. And so she was like, thank you, Massachusetts. But that's the kind of place that we purport to be, that we should be. We're not always perfect about it, but that we need to be. And this issue, I think we've done pretty well with the marriage issue. I think our amicus and our arguments were actually what swayed the Supreme Court as much as the arguments out of New York for Edie Windsor. But I see an issue with kids still. I was at Staples a week ago. They celebrate National Coming Out Day in the company. They've taken great leadership to say, we want employees to be who they are. We don't want people to have two lives, one in work and one at home. They recognize and accept that. And they gave me a little award, and I said, this is going to my team at the office. But this was a company that said, we want our employees to feel welcome here. And that, when you come in Monday morning, you shouldn't have to, pretend you did something else over the weekend, right? And so that's a good sign, right? That corporate culture is recognizing that it's good for the bottom line to be inclusive with women, with people who are gay or lesbian, and that is a good sign. On the other hand, I have a colleague from Virginia, Ken Cuccinelli, who's running for governor of Virginia. Exactly. I hope he loses. Because, and this is what is frightening to me. You see a Ken Cuccinelli or a Ted Cruz. These are not stupid, backwater people. They are highly educated. They are so narrow-minded that it is scary. The good news is, I think, they may have peaked in terms of the popularity. And as far as Ted Cruz goes, I said, we need people in Washington who will seek solutions, not read Dr. Seuss. That was so not that I don't love Dr. Seuss, I do. I love Dr. Seuss. But it's, I think that we've seen in Massachusetts, we've been able to take the lead, but there are other states where there's a lot of work to be done on that issue. We can do what we do here. People look to us as a model of inclusion. I work with other AGs, and I will work with other governors about why these policies have worked in Massachusetts and why they're good for the bottom line. They're good for business, they're good for the state. I was lucky enough, one of my good friends from high school was going to marry her partner. They were in New York this a couple of years ago. They were going to go to California to get married. I said, Nancy, why don't you wait? I think we're going to overturn the 1913 law. So we did, and she came, and Tom and I went out. I performed the wedding. They have a wonderful little boy from Colombia. They've adopted. They have a great marriage. They're a great family, and they're really happy. And you know what? Everybody wins when we do that. Plus, we had, look at the dollars we bring in. Now we got to compete with New Jersey because despite Chris Christie, it's going to be okay in New Jersey. So, my sense is we've taken on some of these tough fights and said, this is fair, and people have been willing to come out and say, this is who I am. We have been on the right side of history. It's a tough argument, but it's the right argument, and it's been a winning argument, and we're going to continue to do that here. And I will do that as your governor, I promise. Thank you, everybody. And back at you. The work you do down here, and how much you care about your communities. That's what inspires me. If you guys didn't care about this, then why should we care? And if you guys don't hold us accountable, let's look at the books, let's look at the open meeting. Government will try and get away with what it can get away with, so you need to hold us accountable too.
Martha's going to be around a little bit, but let me tell you a little bit about our town committee here. We virtually have a member on every single board and every single group in town. We are active in the community at the Yarmouth Council on Aging,